And thank you for joining us with another episode of Ask a Historian. I'm Matthew Wilkinson, historian with Heritage Mississauga. And each week we invite you to send in your questions and we'll explore the fascinating stories of the city of Mississauga together. Like, subscribe, and follow us and stay up to date on all the heritage happenings with Heritage Mississauga. Joining us this week for this episode of Ask a Historian, we have two guests. And this is Rob Stanczyk, who is the curator with the Orlinski Museum and the collections assistant with the city of Mississauga, or the Museums of Mississauga with the city. And beside him is Justine, who, of course, works with Heritage Mississauga, but also is a collections assistant with the Orlinski Museum. So we kind of all have this tangled web that we weave here. And first of all, we've been on before. We've talked about Orlinski, but it's been a while. Can you tell us what the Orlinski Museum is and where it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we have to go back a little bit to kind of the beginning of the WWII seniors residence, which is located in Clarkson in Mississauga. So it was founded a lot of times actually by veterans, Polish veterans. And so a lot of veterans, they came to basically live there. And so one veteran, he was this kind of very famous Polish veteran, a veteran of 3 wars actually. And so his name was or Colonel Orlinski rather. And so he basically wanted to have a museum that was for the Polish veterans in Canada, basically. So that was his dream. Now he passed away in 1992. And so after his death in 2002, they decided to actually found the Orlinski Museum in his honor. And so he's our patron. And the reason for that is it wasn't only his dream, but he also left money and memorabilia to actually kind of get it off the ground. And soon a bunch of other veterans, they were coming to us and, giving us their memorabilia, or when they passed away, their memorabilia came to us. So it's really telling the story of a lot of the Polish veterans that came and settled in Mississauga. So yeah.
And the museum itself is located in WWII,
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah. So it's actually the lower level of WWII. Yeah.
So there's a nutshell. We know what the museum is, how it came to be, and where it's located. You are coming out into the community. Here we are coming, slowly tiptoeing out of COVID, I guess, the years of lockdown. And you're starting to kind of showcase the information, the stories, the imagery, etc., the artifacts that you have. And you're doing it out in the community. And we are hosting an exhibit from you at the Grange in January. Can you tell us about what the exhibit is?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an exhibit in partnership with the Museums of Mississauga. And so, thank you to them for their help with this. And so it's called In Search of History, Polish Contributions in World War II. And so it talks about some of the connections with Polish veterans in Mississauga, their stories, and how a lot of people came to be in Mississauga, some of the contributions to the war effort that they were a part of, the battles, the divisions and units that they were part of, and we're also highlighting specific veteran stories, because that's one thing that the Orlinski Museum is very passionate about, is actually the veteran stories. So not just talking about the units and the divisions and here's a textbook, a history textbook. It's like, well, what were the actual people's stories behind that? And so we have some specific memorabilia from those people that settled in Canada and settled in Mississauga. So that's basically what that is about, and it's on at the Grange until February. And and it's also a traveling exhibit, so you may see this pop up elsewhere in the city as well in future years. So
Yeah, and some of the
Sorry, go on.
yeah, so some of the veterans just was talk about. So we feature specific ones that contribute to development saga. So for example, we do have a photograph of one gentleman. His name was Mieczysław Kominek, and he was actually one of the founders of WWII as well. So we wanted to feature him because he made this, site in Mississauga, so Polish veterans and other people can come and live at the seniors' home. And then we also featured another veteran called Jan Gregalis, and then he was also a huge supporter of the Polish community. So a lot of his funding actually went to Orlinski Museum, and some money went towards high schools that teach the Polish second language as well. So just kind of those veterans, they sell or live their last days in Mississauga at the Valville Seniors Home, just contributing to the overall development.
I think I'm recalling back to, I want to say it was like early 2020, Rob, and you invited me to come see the Orlinski Museum, and I had no idea what to expect, and also didn't know COVID was around the corner. But at least that's what my memory is, and was blown away by the stories that we, to me, relatively unknown in terms of this connection between the Second World War and Polish veterans who then came to Mississauga. Like to me, that was they didn't serve as Canadians. They weren't here during the Second World War, but how many came and settled and lived the rest of their lives in Mississauga and contributed not only to the Orlinski Museum and WWII, but became parts of the members of this community. And to me, it still blows me away. Like it's like I don't know of another group that has that much connection between a significant chapter like the Second World War and our city. Like
I totally agree. And I always am telling people, like, as a Canadian, I feel like I was very ignorant, to be honest, because I just never knew anything really about Polish history, like anything like that. And when I started to actually kind of uncover that history for myself, I was like, why did I not know about this? I mean, at Remembrance Day ceremonies, right, it's like, we hear about the Canadian veterans, which is amazing, but once again, there's all different types of veterans from all over the world. The Sikh Heritage Museum, they do stuff about that. There's just all different types of people and then they came and they settled in Mississauga. And so we're very passionate about trying to celebrate all veterans that at one point or another, Canada and Mississauga were their home. So
it just, to me, it's such a marvelous way to connect into the community as well. To tell these stories. So let's touch on a couple of highlights. I've had a sneak preview. I work in the building, at the Grange. But can you tell us a little bit about those connections between Polish and Canadian forces during the Second World War? Like, we don't only see, our connections aren't only those that came here after the war, but we have connections during the war as well. And just highlight a couple for us, just in brief.
Yeah, so one unit in particular that we mentioned in the exhibition was the Polish First Armored Division. So the Polish First Armored Division was connected to I think it was the First Canadian Field Army. I think it was just like a large Canadian army, and that Polish First Armored Division was part of it. And they would fight with Canadians a lot in Northern Europe. I think they call it the Northern Campaign or Northwestern Campaign. So a lot of the Polish served with Canadians to liberate a lot of parts of Netherlands and Belgium and a lot of those places. And First Armored Division is known for it's escaping me. There's one city in
Breda.
Breda. There you go.
Yeah.
Breda.
This is why there's two of you.
Liberating Breda, and they did such a great job. They were led by this person called Stanisław Maciek, and they were able to liberate the city without a single casualty, which is a really great story.
Yeah, and then a lot of the people, they would go back to Breda, and there would be like annual celebrations all about it, and so they were very much like hailed as heroes long after the fact. So yeah.
And there were connections then in service between those that fought for Canada and those that fought for Poland, I assume. Like there'd be relationships that develop there in there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And what's really fun, really interesting. So one of our founders of our museum, his name is Krzysztof Szydłowski, and him and actually his dad actually were part of that unit, the First Armored Division. And so they were both in that area, but his dad, Zdzisław Szydłowski, was actually also one of the commanders. And then he was also, there's like a memorial dedicated to him in the Netherlands. So we actually did have some delegates from the Netherlands come to Orlinski Museum one time to research more of that story.
Right. Those are kind of neat when you see those reach. You're here in Mississauga, you're developing, this museum that tells these stories, but now your reach is back international again, right? You have these people that, because I'm sure Polish veterans didn't only come to Mississauga, right? Like they're around. So what were there particular campaigns? I know when we tell the story of the Canadian involvement, we often kind of chronologically explore kind of the different battles within the Greater War. Are there particular campaigns that the connect to Polish military veterans?
Yeah, so the most famous ones, the lot of that's associated with the Polish law is the Battle of Monte Cassino, which took place during the Italian campaign. I think they also called the Battle of Rome. So Canadians, British, and other allies have taken part of the battle. But the battle was very, very fierce. But then the Poles were able to make it to the top of the alley and take it over.
That was the if memory serves me right, that was like an elevated position that the Germans held.
Yes, it was a very, very tough. Like, I think they were just like so tired once they got at the end. Like it was just
there's even some stories that a lot of the soldiers, they were just so exhausted by the time they were getting to the top. A lot of them like had to be basically carried to the top, or or they couldn't make it all the way up because it was just so difficult. But the Germans, they did retreat, especially because there was other allies that were also coming to aid the Poles as well, right? So I believe that the Canadians were one of those those forces.
I don't have the breadth of knowledge that you do about Polish forces in the Second World War, although I've certainly read a little bit. They seem to link with the Canadian story quite a bit. There's this idea of this dogged determination seems to parallel the Canadian story and the Polish story. So there might have been a comradeship, if you will, in terms of how they prosecuted the war themselves.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, and we have to remember that they were fighting for their homeland, right? Like the Second World War started in their backyard, and so a lot of people were displaced. I actually, there's a quote that I remember you and I were talking about in terms of Black history, about how I think it was talking about how slavery is not Black history, it interrupted Black history, and it kind of reminding me of actually the Polish story a little bit, because there's people who are just going to school, tending their farms, and going to the cinema, and like just doing everything that normal people would do, and then war interrupts that and they have to flee, and there's a diary from one of the veterans, and he talks about how his commanding officer basically had them all standing there, and he said, you have to run now, you have to get out, right? And so like I can't even imagine that and what they would have been fighting for, and the lengths that they went to defend their homeland. So absolutely, that sense of determination, I think, is such an important thing in the Polish story.
And one of the stories you linked to, and I will admit I know next to nothing about this, and I'm curious to learn some more, and maybe that's an open invitation to come see the exhibit and talk to you guys as well. But the Polish Army resistance during the war, that certainly seems to be, in what little I know of it, something very much on the home front. And can you tell us a little bit about that part of the story?
Yeah, so after the Nazi occupation in Poland, right? So a lot of people have fled Poland to fight in different countries, but there was still a home army in Poland called the Polish Home Army. So different resistance groups were in different parts of the country. So there's one in Warsaw, of course, like the famous Warsaw Uprising that everyone knows. There's one in Krakow. There was even one, I believe, where I was born, in Tarnow as well. So just lots of uprisings. So yeah, we did have several veterans that lived in Valvia that took place in the Warsaw Uprising, and so yeah, it was happened
Yeah.
in 1944.
Yeah,
Right.
I was reading the story of this one lady, Helena, and she was fighting in the Warsaw Uprising, and she was kind of born into this very like upper crust family, but she had a lot of wits about her, right? And she knew a bunch of languages and everything. So when the war started, she was only 17, and she would kind of charm her way past checkpoints and all this kind of stuff, and she would be like ferrying messages, arms, all this different stuff back and forth, and and everyone underestimated her because she's this young sweet little girl basically, and so she fought in the Warsaw Uprising, and at one point, I mean, many people have heard about how they had to take to the sewers, so you can imagine how pleasant that was, and so she took to the sewers and was ferrying once again arms and wounded soldiers back and forth all across the city, and she was actually captured and sent to like a very notorious POW camp. And so she was one of the people that later ended up immigrating to Canada and living at Valvilla. Just like these stories are absolutely amazing. Another thing that I was also thinking about, Rob, was the Operation Underwriter.
The other name for it is actually in Polish called Operation Most, which means like Operation Bridge. So what this was is that there was this Polish pilot named Kazimierz Schreier. So him and along with other pilots, they got news of this rocket. It was called, I don't know if it was the A2 rocket, but it was one
I
of the
think it was V2.
V2 rocket,
V2
yeah.
rocket.
So it was the first like long range missile made by the Germans, or in the war at least.
Yeah.
And so there was a misfire by the Germans, and it fell somewhere in the Polish homelands. And so the resistance groups were able to get there, and they dismantled this rocket. Got dismantled it.
And they hit it.
And they hit it. So then they sent word to the Polish government in exile, which at this time was in London. And then so this pilot, Kazimierz Schreier, and then other ones, they actually went with a plane and they landed in near a nearby airfield near my hometown, Tarnow again. Gotta mention it. And yeah, and then they found it, but then there was still a lot of nearby fighting because there's still a lot of fighting going on. And then to make things worse, once they got it, their plane got stuck. So there's like soldiers coming and there's fighting coming. They're like freaking out and everything. So they're like digging out trenches and everything, and then putting wooden boards on there.
And then the thing that made me laugh was the pilot. Because he was the only Polish pilot. Like there's a bunch of like British and stuff like that. But he's the only Polish one, and so he was like, maybe I should just like join the resistance and just like run away, and I can just go see my family. And he was like, no, I can't do this. Like, what are the other people gonna do? Like, it's so obvious there's a British guy. So he's like, okay, I've gotta get out of here, right? And they actually cut the hydraulic lines at one point, and so when they finally did take off, they couldn't even get the landing gears up, and so they start just like pouring like their coffee, their tea, water, like anything in the hydraulic lines just to get it up. And so they made it back, but he also sailed in Canada as well. So and so he's another one of the veterans.
Stories must be recorded from this. It's just incredible.
I know.
Yeah, there's just a lot. Like even this one other one called Zbigniew Kabata. So he actually won Order of Canada medal. And then for his contributions to fish biology, but he also was in the resistance group. But one thing that he actually did a lot is he was actually in charge of like the underground press. So you had said like newspapers out. He was a poet. He wrote like the national like anthem for the AK army and everything like that.
Yeah. So, AK is like the Polish.
The Polish army.
Yeah. It's like Army Krajowa. Yeah. So that like that's in Polish home army. Yeah. So, but yeah, sorry, we're getting a bit off topic. But
that's okay. So I was gonna say,
it's so
Yeah, we're
interesting.
doing a lot of the exhibitions right now, Orlinski. So we're like revisiting a lot of these stories, and they're just so fascinating. So we can go on like all day about our veterans.
Yeah.
Because so it's a really veteran based, but
Well, this is an opportunity. I'll give you the floor. Make a plea for people to come out and see the exhibit and connect with you.
yeah.
If what's your sales pitch on this? Let's hear it.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, definitely we're trying to redo a lot of our exhibits at the Orlinski Museum right now and get more out into the community. So this traveling exhibit is a way that we can do that. You know, reaching out to Canadians, to Polish Canadians, you know, and people really anywhere, because we think that these stories like really need to be told. And so yeah, so hopefully the Orlinski Museum will be open to the public soon, just because of COVID. You know, it's been closed for a long time because we're in a retirement community. We have to be respectful towards them and their health, of course. So yeah, so just, you know, keep up to date for any updates. But in the meantime, please do come and visit the exhibit and reach out to us as well on our social media and our email. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, yeah, and we have a website as well, which we can put. I don't know if you're gonna put it on the video or
Yeah,
something.
no, we'll share any links you want.
Yeah, yeah. Link down below.
Yeah, down below. And also we'll come the new year. We'll I know Heritage Mississauga will promote having the exhibit there. I'm sure you will as well. And you know, come out and see the exhibit. It's but a taste of a much larger story and a much larger collection that is housed at the Orlinski Museum. So it's just fabulous. So I encourage people to come out and again connect to Orlinski Museum. They'd like to hear from you and certainly share stories that they've got. And thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for joining us here to explore the stories around this exhibit and around the museum itself. And just you know, as we go forward, also we have to thank the partners, right? Museums of Mississauga, a great partner with the Orlinski Museum, and we're excited to have you at the Grange with Heritage Mississauga. So all the best to the Orlinski Museum as it continues to kind of come back out into the world a little bit, although it's kind of the first time really out in the community as well, right? Like you haven't done a lot of community exhibits yet.
Well, yeah, this is one of the first times. I know the other ones we did a couple of exhibitions in the libraries.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, no, this is
yeah, well, but also too, though, we kind of just got more involved around 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
But I would say, you know, our curators, our former curator, George Kowalczyk, he did so much work and was really out in the community. And so he received the Community Heritage Award at Heritage Mississauga's The Credits event this year. So for all that work, because you know the Orlinski Museum is now 20 years old, and yeah, exactly. And so he did so much work with that, and you know, out in the community. But you know, a lot of these curators are elderly now, and so we're trying to really make sure that it carries on into the next generation.
Well, I'm sure with the leadership and the passion that you guys have for this, that will be the case. And really wish not only the exhibit well, but you know, the continued growth and relaunch, if you will, of the Orlinski Museum. Looking forward to future programs together as well. So
yeah,
with that, we'll say thank you, and thank you to everyone for joining us for another episode of Ask a Historian. Come check out the exhibit at the Grange. Connect with Justine and Rob and the Orlinski Museum through their social media and learn more about Polish veterans in Mississauga, their connections to Canada and to the wider story of the Second World War. Absolutely fascinating story. So thank you, Justine and Rob, for joining us.
Right. Thank
you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
And stay tuned. Join us next week for another episode of Ask a Historian. Like, subscribe, and follow us and stay up to date with all heritage happenings with Heritage Mississauga. And we will see you again on Ask a Historian.